What's up, everybody? Doug here with Living the Dream. Man, I really appreciate you guys for answering those questions and for participating in my little experiment here, my little project. You guys have been the best. If you missed the first video, I will leave links right here. You can go ahead and click on that card and you can just follow them through to get to the logical perspectives that we're all trying to take steps towards. Basically, the last video that I posted, I asked you guys, what was the job of the police officer? What was the role that the police officer should play? I urged you to think in terms of being open-minded and creating the parameters of a police officer's job description without taking into consideration what they already do. I got dozens of comments, and of those comments, only one, I believe, actually addressed the concept of what a police officer is. And it's not because you guys answered wrong, but it does illustrate the problem that I was trying to highlight. That problem being nobody really knows what a police officer should be doing. Because this institution has existed for so long, we all kind of stopped thinking about what it is or what it should be. It's just been an accepted part of society. I stated before that I believe we need police officers. And from my ex-cop perspective, I have seen what police officers have turned into. And I want to highlight for you and illustrate for you what it is that a police officer does now. Because none of you guys answered wrong. You guys said amazing things. Most of you said things like, yes, we should have police, but we want good police that serve us and that don't serve themselves and don't just take care of each other, but take care of the public. And a lot of you said, being a police officer is a hard job and that they should be able to do their jobs. A lot of you talked about the problems in Hawaii and the things that you've seen, no matter where you're from or where you live. And you highlighted the fact that you need police officers because of all the things that you guys have seen in your lives. My girl, Hawaiian Soul, she said, wasn't the original idea of a police officer a peace officer? Now, I don't know, I can't speak to when this concept of policing was invented. I know a lot of people say that the police department was invented during the time when they were rounding up runaway slaves, which is a part of the reason why a lot of people are attacking the foundations of the police departments. But I'm not sure that actually is the truth. It would be interesting if a lot of you guys would look into the police department in Hawaii. It goes back, that actual department goes back many years, even before the founding date of the Honolulu Police Department. But I see where Hawaiian Soul was going with that. So I appreciate that comment. I think that a lot of people feel like the police department's job is to keep peace. And I think that may be the best description of what the police department should have to be doing. And I think police officers would love that. I know that when I was becoming a police officer, going through academy, and I would envision that one day putting on my badge and what that would mean to me and then what that would mean to my life. And I remember being so excited because I could wake up every day like a superhero and be the person that represents good in the world. I could go to work and it would be good versus evil. It was so exciting and motivating to know, to wake up every day and think, I'm gonna go fight crime today. And that's what kept me going. And that's what turned me into the officer that I became, is that I really just wanted to fight crime. I really just wanted to be good versus evil. I wanted to chase bad guys. I didn't even want to see normal people. I didn't even want to see the people that are watching this video. The chances are I would never see you in my line of duty. And I know for a fact I would never want to see you because I didn't want to deal with normal people. I wanted to deal with bad people because there was it's this way that you could partition your brain into working. Because if you think about it, a police officer has a normal life like you. He has a family, he has a garden, or he has a garage or a car. He has children, he has a hobby, he has friends, he has bills, he has medical problems. And he has to manage all those normal things. And he has to manage a job the same way you do. The difference is his job requires him to take a stance. There's no neutrality. As a police officer, you stand up for the law. And as a Honolulu police officer, I stood up for the laws of Hawaii. These laws are passed by politicians who are voted in by the people who live there. By and large, the laws are things that we can all agree on. There's a lot of things that I didn't agree with that were laws. Hawaii is a may issue state. And the police chief has the right to determine who can carry a weapon or not. And I didn't think that was fair, but I upheld that law. And if I found you with a pistol, I was going to arrest you. And I think that for most police officers, I know for myself, I can really only speak for me, I only really cared about the bad crimes. I mean, I hate to say it, because I just wanted to deal with bad people. And so when you're a police officer and you're only dealing with bad people, you're just thinking, I'm gonna go find bad people. People that are beating their wives. People that are shooting people, stabbing people, stealing from people, burglarizing businesses. People that are lying, ripping people off, committing fraud. That's what you want to go after. People who are sexually assaulting people, taking advantage of the elderly or the mentally impaired. That's what you think about when you want to fight crime. You have a victim and you have a suspect, and you want to find the suspects and protect the victims. But then over the years, all these auxiliary, or I should say ancillary laws are created, like a perimeter of laws. And every year those perimeters get wider and wider and wider. And eventually you're enforcing laws like the parks are closed. So I patrolled the parks on Oahu, and specifically in Honolulu, basically from Punahou to Liliha Street, all the way up the mountain down to Ala Moana Beach Park. And I tried to specialize in apprehending fugitives, high bail warrant fugitives, people that were running from the law for felonies that they committed, people that were dealing drugs in the park. There were people that would lure people to the park with drugs to then manipulate them, take advantage of them. That happened all the time. We had a lot of sex assaults in the parks. Prostitution was heavy in the parks. And in Honolulu, especially in the Liliha area, the prostitution is really wrapped up with drug abuse. So I had a lot of drug dealing going on. And then there was a lot of robberies in the park. So police officers, when they start, they just want to fight crime. They want to catch bad guys. They're not concerned with parking complaints. They're not even concerned with speeding tickets. You want to get drunk drivers because they kill people. You want to get people that are driving stolen cars. But to find people driving stolen cars, you need to pull over people on the road. You want to find people that are robbing or sexually assaulting or assaulting people in parks. But to get them, you have to have laws that close the parks. So you close the parks, and then we have probable cause to approach these people. When we stop them, we run checks, we find out they're a wanted fugitive, they go to jail. Or we find them with a bunch of credit cards that aren't theirs. That's how you find those people, are with those laws. And eventually, the whole legal system gets swollen with these Menini laws that the police departments use as probable cause to catch these people. And it goes off statistics, right? If you got tons of criminals in the parks at night, and most of your crimes are happening in the parks at night, or most of the people that do crimes are going to the park after they do them, then that park becomes a place of interest for you, right? So they closed the parks after 10 because there was too many problems. Now you got normal people that go there that want to fish or hang out or have a late lunch or a romantic night with their wife, and now they're getting kicked out. It's not because we really care that they're in the park. It's because we need the parks to be closed, because that's where all the crime happens, and it's dangerous at night. And I know people don't want to believe that the parks are dangerous in Honolulu, but they are. If I had $1 for every tourist that got robbed or assaulted or sexually assaulted in a park at night because they were by themselves trying to sleep under a tent because they heard it was cool, I would be rich. We don't have these ideas in our head that we're going to be writing tickets, or that we're going to be writing COVID enforcement tickets, or that we're going to be writing speeding tickets even. That's not the idea in our head, and we never wanted that, and the people don't want that. That's why I asked you guys to think about what their job description should be, because I believe that the police officer's job should be to fight crime, to be a peace officer, to keep the peace. And there are a lot of things that police officers do that I don't think they should have to do. But what happens is there's a budget for the police department, and so the mayor sends down orders, he wants this to be enforced or whatever. And so this law gets made, or this bill gets passed, and now we got to enforce this tow zone from this time to this time and all that other stuff. Well, I believe that there should be more civilian positions in the police department. I don't believe that a police officer should have to deal with parking. I don't believe that a police officer should have to deal with the parking complaints when somebody calls and said, there's a car that's parked 6 inches from my driveway apron, or there's this car parked more than 12 inches from the curb. I don't think a police officer should have to do that. I'm not even sure a police officer should have to be the one to investigate a cold case burglary. When you have a burglary, you have a house that had been broken into, the person comes back after work and their house is ransacked and they call police. The police officer now has like a 2-hour investigation he has to do. Fingerprints, photos, diagrams. I understand that a police officer is needed for positions like that when they first enter the home, because the homeowner comes home, the house is ransacked, they're scared, the scary music starts playing on their head, they call 911 and stand outside. The police officer shows up, he clears the house with his gun out, we do it all the time, make sure there's nobody in the house, checks all the spots, say the scene is safe. Then he has this huge investigation to make. I think what should happen is there should be a civilian who specializes in investigations and forensics, who then clears the house, takes the photos, takes the evidence, like an evidence tech who goes in the field. But instead you have police officers that are doing that. So a lot of the time in academy is spent on these investigations. And I can only speak for Honolulu Police Department, but we're like lawyers on the street. They're like street attorneys. They know the law so well, and they study the law so well, and not just the law, mind you, which is tricky in itself. There's things that they have to understand about the law. So when we're talking about courts, you have to think about things. There are certain things that the Supreme Court has said that we have to do, but then there's past that, the prosecutors have certain regulations that they place on police officers before they'll take certain cases. And I'll get in that in another video, because I think that's one of the biggest problems that the police department has to deal with, is that's the prosecutor's office. The police officer shouldn't have to do these things. He should specialize in fighting crime and keeping the peace. Fighting crime and keeping the peace. Keeping people safe. Apprehending bad guys. He should be patrolling and being proactive, because he's the one out there with a gun and a badge. He can stop bad, strong bad people from hurting weak good people. That's what his job should be. But instead of being out there patrolling, now he's typing in the office 2 hours on a cold case burglary, or typing in his car, investigating these crimes. Or there's other crimes like financial crimes, that there's no suspect in the area. It's a suspect who lives in France or in Nigeria, in some other state on the mainland maybe. And he just ripped somebody off for 20 grand on the phone because they sent him $20,000 in a scam. When we're thinking in terms of what a police officer should do, I'm thinking of things like, obviously, all hot calls. When there's a fight going on, or there's a dangerous circumstance on a scene, a police officer should be dispatched. But there's things like a homeless guy has a leg that's bleeding on the sidewalk and someone's like, can you come check on this guy? I don't think a police officer should have to go to that. I think that that's what the EMS is for. But we would co-response, and we would type up reports. We have a report called a MISPUB in Honolulu, and it stands for Miscellaneous Public Report. And the MISPUB was for when there wasn't a crime, but something had to be documented. A tree falls up on Tantalus and it blocks the road and they have to divert traffic. We would type up a MISPUB for that, stating that this time this tree fell down, I was dispatched, I sat there for 3 hours, diverted traffic went down the other way. It's like a secretary typing up a report about what happened. Now, because that's traffic control, they send a police officer. I just think that there are better options. But in places like Honolulu, you have police officers doing this kind of stuff. And not only does it annoy the police officers because they're literally trained to go out there and fight crime, but now they're sitting here diverting traffic and typing up some report that has to be, some guy tripped over the sidewalk, right? And since it's city and county property, the guy tripped and fell and hurt his knee, the officer now has got to type up a case. And we have this case called an injured care for, an ICF, or a SCF, which is a sick cared for, which means that somebody was sick or somebody was injured, now they're okay, there was no crime involved, but we're documenting it. I don't think a police officer should have to do that. And I'm sure we're not the only police department that has to do that stuff, especially in large cities like Honolulu. So what happens is people start piling all these things on police officers to get them to fill out these reports, like car accidents. Hawaii is not a no-fault state. Hawaii has a tricky insurance issue for car insurance. We had to type these cases for a car accident. The stuff that we had to type up was crazy. You had to do all these crazy diagrams. I mean, it's a major car accident report. We have minors and majors. Those things take forever. There's tons of stuff that you got to fill out. And it takes forever, man. Meanwhile, stuff's popping off on your beat. I can't tell you how many times I test out on the radio when I started work, and right away I see there's 6 police cars off on the same site. Now it's 10 p.m., right? I started at 10 p.m. and there's 6 officers that are off on the freeway because there was a car accident. They're all there because they're trying to help each other to get this report done so they can get back out on the road because the bars are popping. It's a Friday night. The radio's going off. There's fights or whatever. I don't think police officers should have to do certain jobs like that. So anything that's documentation or like cold cases, I just don't think a police officer should have to deal with. We should have police officers going to the alarm calls with the open doors, right? So every time there's an alarm call, we would get sent, we go there, if we get there and the door's open and the alarm's going off, we'd pull out our gun and we make entry and we clear the house. Then we type up a report, send it to the alarm company. If it was a burglary, then we make the burglary, but if it was just a false alarm, we'd make the false alarm. So I think in those cases, when it may be a hot call or it may be dangerous, the officers co-respond, clear it, make sure it's safe, and then they leave while the other people who are trained in forensics or trained in documentation, like secretaries, they can use their observation skills and write down things with their pen and their paper or type it on their laptop. And then a police officer can be back on the road, keeping people safe. Now, what does that do for them? I think that what it does for them is it frees up time so that the officers can have more training. There is not an officer that I know that would not tell you he wants more training. He wants more training in things like physical fitness. He wants more training in things like surveillance. Officers want to be trained more with their weapons. They want to be trained more with their self-defense. They want to be trained more with their psychological maneuvering or verbal judo. They want to be trained more in psychology. They want to be trained more in how to deal with a mentally ill person, whether it's a suspect or a victim or whatever. They want to be trained more. They just want to be better. But what happens is there's so much on the police officer's plate that there is no time for that. They're already strapped. When I was at the Honolulu Police Department, they were understaffed all the time. I left patrol and went to a support unit. I rode ATVs for the last 3 or 4 years of my career, and we were not on the radio. We didn't get sent to accidents. We didn't get sent to parking complaints. We didn't get sent to any of that. We were off the radio. We were proactive. We were a proactive unit, and it showed. We went out and we found bad guys. That's what we did. And if there was ever a call in the park, we would cancel patrol and we would make sure that patrol didn't have to come into our park. We would take care of it. If there was a fight or a car accident or whatever, then we'd deal with it because it was in our park and we took care of our responsibility. And we watched each other's back, and there was a small unit. It was only 4 of us. Because we got to manage our time and we got to go out and be proactive, we knew where the bad guys were. We knew where our hot spots were. We knew what times to check. We had snitches that would tell us where the bad people were. If a cop's gun went missing, we would go to all the people we knew that we had good relationships with, and they would give us intel. And we developed relationships with people in the community. People knew us. The good guys knew us. They knew that we were making checks on the parks or the bad areas. And then the bad guys knew us. We treated them with fairness and respect. I remember there were spots where we would go check all the time because bad guys would always go hide out in these spots. So we'd have maybe some homeless guys that lived in a certain area. Every time we go to that area, because we have to cite for being in the park after a certain time, there would be a guy that I didn't know. And I would say, "What's your name?" And he'd tell me, "My name's Kimo." And 90% of the time that wasn't their name. They were lying to me. They think they can get away with it. Because there's a lot of cops who on patrol have other things to get to. They're not going to sit here and argue with you. But I didn't have anywhere else to be. My job was to find bad guys. So I'm going to find out who you are because you are violating the law and now you're being detained. They would give me their information. It would be bad information. If the homeless guys in that camp knew that they were lying, I cannot tell you how many times they took a slap to the head and said, "Don't lie to him. You're not going to ruin this for us. We got a good relationship with this guy. Yeah, he writes us our tickets, whatever he's got to do, but he respects us. He treats us good. We don't cause any trouble. You're not going to ruin this for me. Tell him your real name." And the guy tells him the real name or just takes off running because he's got a $50,000 warrant. And then we proceed to catch him. That happened all the time. When you have an area of responsibility like a beat or a sector, you know that more than anybody. You know that better than your brass. You know that better than your sergeants. You know that better than the reporters. You know that better than the media. You know it better than the people that live in that area. Because you're the one that's clearing these parks at night or this corner at night, or you always get this spot where stolen cars are found. So if you have more time to be proactive and get to know your beat and be somebody who gets out of the car more and meets people on his beat and actually makes a connection with that area, then you know when something's off. They call it the spidey sense. It's when the hair on the back of your neck stands up. And now that's not articulatable. You can't put that in a report. That's not probable cause. You can't use that for a reason to stop somebody. But those things are real. And when you know a place, you know your own backyard, you know your own driveway in your house, right? If you roll up at your house and your broom is not where you left it, or the TV is turned a different way, or you walk in and the doorknob feels funny, or you walk in and a light was left on, but you didn't leave it on. Like, you know these things because you're so familiar and you're there all the time, you get comfortable with it. So when something's off, you know it. So many times, People call for burglaries, and when we get there, they're standing outside. And we're like, what's missing? They're like, nothing, I haven't gone in yet. I'm like, how do you know someone's in your house? He's like, because that's not how my window looks. I didn't leave my front door like that. Or I opened the front door, I could tell. I smelled something different. That happens. It's because you know your spot. Well, if a police officer had more time to do that, they would. The problem is they got all this other crazy stuff they got to do. And even traffic enforcement. Other states got it. You're speeding. They have a sensor. You go by at 65 miles an hour. It's in a 50. It takes a picture of your license plate. You get the ticket in the mail. You just eliminated the reason for the police officer to have to stop you. Now, that doesn't mean police officers can't stop you. I'm just saying, don't put the burden on them to be the only ones fighting this thing. Have the traffic division. Traffic division does traffic stops all the time. I just think that the patrolman, the police officer, should have more time to train and to be proactive. And they're burdened down by all these crazy things. Not to mention the thing that it does to your mental game. And I talked about this in the last episode. Can you imagine what it's like to be at a stabbing? Which I remember I went to the stabbing, there's blood all over the place. It's down by Kaka'ako. Meanwhile, there's like parking complaints and a loud noise complaint, TV too loud, a guy swerving in and out of traffic call. And now this is on my beat. So the call comes over the radio and I got other guys that are on their beats doing their job, but they got to go into my beat and take care of my section while I'm off on this stabbing. Well, I need to focus on this. This is important. But now they're off on my traffic complaint when their beat starts popping off. And it's just like this domino effect. If we could have people that took care of those things, they don't have to study self-defense. They don't have to study jiu-jitsu. They don't have to study verbal judo. They don't have to get pepper sprayed or tased or learn how to shoot a gun. So the department won't have to put that kind of an investment in those people. And now you got people worried that that's going to cost police jobs. But it won't. If you keep the same amount of police officers you have, but you just increase the civilian people that can handle the cold case stuff or the stuff that's not violent or is not a risk, well then now those police officers can go do what they're meant to do and crime goes down. I think every police officer should be able to work out every day on shift. His job requires him to be in shape. But then I also think that there should be like health requirements and physical assessment requirements. What the people want police officers to be can be summed up in one word. You want superheroes. And I don't think that's crazy. I think that's legitimate. But they should be paid like superheroes. We have no problem paying $10,000 for a surgery to a doctor. Well, if you think about what the value of a police officer should be, the fact that you want him to be able to stop murderers, to be able to keep his calm and be patient when someone's yelling at him and arguing with him, to be able to sit back and observe and not jump to conclusions, not to freak out and hurt people, even though he just saw murders and abuses and sex assaults all day. And his mind is getting ready to break because he can't believe the lows that humanity can reach down into. And then he's going to go to that baby's death, and we have to expect his brain not to snap inside a little bit. If he's a father, to see a dead child, that officer who just got back from that suicide of the 13-year-old girl that just hung herself in her closet, he'll never forget how that looked. He had to get her down. He had to get down a stiff body of a 13-year-old girl who hung herself in her closet. Now he has to go home to his 13-year-old girl who's asking him for homework help. How does that not shift something deep inside of him? Because they need psychological training. They need therapy. But when you make it so that the officer has to be the one that reaches out for it, that's when I think you ask too much. Because no one wants to dig deep down inside of them and pull those demons out. But during annual recall training that a police officer has to go through every year, we do get psychological training. The police psychologist comes out and talks about the dynamics of trauma on children and how to deal with mental health and stuff like that. But it's like a 1 or 2 or 4 hour class once a year. Officers should have access to psychological evaluations and psychologists every week. It should literally be that the officer has like scheduled times every week where he gets to go in and talk to the psychologist, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, to help him process these things. There should be physical assessments. Officers should be in shape. The officer should not have to go to his tools all the time. I got scolded once because I didn't go to my tools, and I ended up getting hurt because I decided not to tase somebody. I got scolded by my supervisor. Not my direct supervisor, but by command, one of the brass. And he had 2 kukui nuts on his shoulder. And I got scolded because I got hurt and I didn't tase him. It was, why didn't you tase him? You should have tased him. Well, I was comfortable with where I was at. Sure, I ended up getting hurt. You got me there. But I didn't need to tase him. That would have reached a level where if I lost my taser and that person grabbed that taser, now I have to shoot him. Like that Rayshard Brooks case. Dude, if a guy grabs your taser and points it at you, he's already showing that he's willing to harm you and incapacitate you. That's enough for a police officer to realize you're not getting my gun and shooting me. So you pull out your gun and you defend yourself. When someone has a deadly weapon or a weapon that could cause great bodily harm, as a police officer, you got to shoot him to stop him. And I didn't want to go that way. And I knew I didn't need to tase the guy. Now, I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew I had a few minutes in me. Why? Because I trained. And when you're confident with your self-defense and your ability and capabilities as a self-defense or a martial arts tactician, or maybe you're a jiu-jitsu player, you know how long you can go. And so you don't rush to your tools. And then I think there should be training for the tools. So we have tons of training that officers need and want. They would love to do. Dude, I'm telling you, if officers could go to train jiu-jitsu twice a week and go to the range twice a week and then go to psychologists twice a week, work out at the gym twice a week, then we would have the officers that everyone wants. Everyone complains about the officers aren't patient enough, or they always give me attitude, or they always act tantaran. When an officer flexes on you, it sucks that he did that, and I'm not going to justify that, but you got to understand, he probably just came from a case that was more important than what he's dealing with you for. His supervisor probably told him to go out and get some citations because we're getting speeding complaints. So he goes out there, he's got to cite a guy, and you're mad that he wasn't nice to you, but he just came from an abuse or whatever. Or worse, he came from something like stupid that he shouldn't have to do, he's doing secretarial work with a gun on his badge, wasting the gun and badge, all that time that he should be spending protecting and serving, and he's in some office typing some stuff up. Which, by the way, when you screw up that paperwork, you get what we call a tickler, or you get a 384, which is getting written up. And the more paperwork you got to do, the more chances you get of getting written up. So now you're worried about command. The entire police department is worried about command coming down on them. I always would get like a tickler about something. I accidentally sent a copy of the paperwork to the wrong division, or I didn't send enough copies, or whatever, right? You get a tickler, you do it a couple times, you get a 384. After the 384, you get a 121. And now it's on your record. Now you're screwed. And that's constantly raining down on you. And so now you're disgruntled because you're like, I shouldn't even be having to do this work. I got a gun and a badge on. I was trained to protect people. You spent $100,000 training me for 7 months, and then really a year with field training. Spent a year training me, spent $100,000, and I'm out here doing this? I know the law better than anybody, and I was trained to protect people, and I can shoot a grouping this big at a target at 20 yards, and you got me doing this? So police officers go through that. That's real. And I think that we could reduce all that by actually focusing the people that you train the most and that you expect to be superheroes on doing superhero work, chasing bad guys and protecting innocent people. If we're getting burglaries in an area, have them sit plainclothes watching guys. So when the burglary goes down, you're on them. Cops want to make the world a better place. They want to protect people. They want to catch bad guys. That's what drives them. They don't care about you speeding. They don't care about you parking wrong. They don't care about the fact that you think your neighbor's party was too loud. Don't get mad when you see them out doing COVID enforcement. They don't want to do COVID enforcement. They don't get bonuses for that. But when the department says, hey, we need to go tag these guys for COVID enforcement, they're not supposed to be on the beach, so we're going to do an overtime operation. Who wants to make overtime? You can't blame. Anybody in Hawaii knows you can't blame somebody for taking an overtime shift. Everybody needs overtime. It might not be possible to survive in Oahu without overtime in any profession. So the cops take it. Now they're out there on ATVs tagging guys for COVID. They do what their job requires of them, but they don't want to do those things. But they will do them. because that's their job. Police officers should fight crime, they should bring peace, and they should keep peace. Protect the good people, arrest and put away the bad people. Train them to deal better with those people, to be more patient, to be able to use their hands, to not go to their weapons as quick. Teach them in patience and psychology, verbal judo. And this world will be a better place still. You'll have happier police officers. You have more productive police officers. Crime will go down. People will be safer and there will be more peace. That's what I think we need to change about the police departments. And that's why I asked you what you think a police officer's job should be. It should be going to rapes and sex assaults. It should be going to robberies. It should be going to places where there's a bad guy. Police officers should be out there proactively patrolling their streets and reinforcing the laws, influencing good people to do good things and bad people to stop doing what they're doing. But that leads me to my next question. If a police officer's job is to keep the peace, protect the innocent, and to arrest the bad guys, to stop crime from happening, to prevent and arrest for crime, how are they allowed to do that? What power does a police officer have to stop that crime? And you can see where this is going. Why do they have a gun on their waist? Why do they have a badge on their chest? When they see crime and they see bad things, they have to stop it. Should an officer be allowed to use force to stop crime? Should an officer be allowed to use force to apprehend someone who committed a crime? And what is that force? It's a tricky one because it's multi-tiered. Do you think a taser, a pepper spray, a baton, a gun, and handcuffs is appropriate? What tools should an officer be able to use to apprehend a criminal or stop a crime? And when should they be able to use them? Let me know in the comment section. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you guys for joining. And until the next time, aloha.